the pain got really bad for me because the tumor was, involved with the nerves that kind of go down the legs. So I lost the ability to walk. I lost my ability to stand or even sit because doing those things was just too painful. This story goes back 7 years ago. I had just celebrated my 35th birthday and everything was pretty good in my life. And I've always been a very health conscious person, very active, careful with what I eat. And I started having back pain, and the back pain got so bad that I kept ending up in the ER. And eventually I got an MRI and the doctors discovered that I had a tumor on my sacrum at the very end of my spine. And it was about the size of an egg. And so that was causing all the pain. And about a week later, I was diagnosed with bone cancer. And it's a super rare type of bone cancer. And so the thing about having a rare cancer is there's not a lot of treatment options. And so they also told me that this type of cancer does not respond to chemotherapy or radiation. So my only option for treatment was surgery. And so initially I was like, great, because I don't want to have chemotherapy. And then I heard the news that the surgery would entail the amputation of my sacrum. And because if you amputate the sacrum, you also lose bowel and bladder function along with other things. And I've always been like a surfer because I live in San Diego. And I was also told that I'd never be able to surf again. And that was a huge part of my life. So I decided I was not going to have this surgery and I was going to figure out another way to heal. And so I ended up seeing 3 other oncologists. All of them told me that surgery is the only way, and I'm so sorry. And I had my surgery scheduled for 6 weeks, and I was still just determined to find some other way to heal. And so I did a lot of things. I went to Brazil to see a healer, a spiritual healer. I went to a clinic, an alternative therapy clinic for 3 weeks in Mexico. And I saw a naturopathic doctor, and nothing was really working. And I had to get another MRI to prepare for the surgery just a few days before I was supposed to have the surgery. And they discovered that this tumor had tripled in size within 6 weeks. And so that surgeon threw in the towel, and he wanted to recommend me to see a specialist at UCLA. So then there was like more time that I had to try to figure something out. And eventually I met a radiologist who was willing to do something called high dose proton beam radiation. So normally this type of tumor does not respond to radiation, but they said if we give it really high doses, then it's been shown to be effective in about 98% of cases to at least shrink the tumor. So I decided to go that route, and the surgeon at UCLA told me that if I went this route, he didn't expect me to be alive after 5 years, but I just decided to go ahead and take this risk. And I went through radiation treatment for about 8 weeks. And around that time, the pain got really bad for me because the tumor was, involved with the nerves that kind of go down the legs. So I lost the ability to walk. I lost my ability to stand or even sit because doing those things was just too painful. I also was on extremely high doses of morphine, and I was actually on 8 different pain medications. And my mom walked around all the time with like a bottle of Narcan because she was worried about me having an overdose. And I kept quitting radiation because the pain got so bad, and then they would keep giving me more morphine to get me through. And the pain was so bad for me that I just remember like I didn't want to wake up the next day because I just didn't want to go through it all over again, because even just being bedridden, I was in really horrible pain. And I just thought if I can get through the radiation treatment, then I'll be fine. And so I got through, and the tumor kept growing all throughout the 8 weeks of treatment. And then I was told, just wait, because sometimes it takes a little bit for the radiation to kick in. So I waited 3 months, and then I got another MRI, and the tumor had continued to grow during that time. So it was becoming apparent that the radiation treatment was not working. So then I felt like I had no choice but to go back to the surgeon and get the surgery, which I was trying to avoid. And so I went to see him, and he said my skin and my lower back was so damaged from the radiation that I would have to wait at least 3 months before he could perform the surgery, because otherwise there would be complications and the wound wouldn't heal, the surgical wound. So this was like kind of my rock bottom moment. I didn't know what else to do. I had to wait 3 months. In the meantime, I had this like tumor that was growing and growing and growing inside of me. And then they kept telling me that the bigger it gets, you know, the more likely it is to spread. And they also found a spot in the middle of my spine that they thought might also be the tumor spreading. So it was also infiltrating my bone marrow as well. So it was just like a very scary time. And I kept asking myself, like, what can I do? What can I do? You know? And around that time, I received a book from Amazon on my doorstep. And it was called Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. And the funny thing is, I have no idea to this day who sent me that book. I asked everybody, all my friends. Nobody apparently sent it to me. So I read that book cover to cover, and I was very inspired. And something I forgot to mention is that, you know, going back to before I was diagnosed, I was sitting on the beach one day just in pain, and I was like watching the surfers, and I was kind of just sad that I was like in too much pain to go surf. And a random guy on the beach in his 60s came up to me, and he's like, "Hey, why are you so sad?" And we started this like conversation, and he told me his life story. But anyway, he told me like that he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he was put on hospice care, and he came to the beach and just was like meditating every day and had all these mystical experiences. And I just kind of thought he was crazy, but I was like, okay, well, that's a cool story. But anyway, 3 weeks after I met this random guy on the beach, I was diagnosed with cancer. So it was like a really interesting, what I thought at the time was like, oh, what an interesting coincidence. But then after reading Joe's book, I thought maybe that was more than a coincidence. And so I started doing the meditations at that time every day. And I couldn't even sit, so I was doing the meditations kind of laying down. And then I was reading his other books, and I was just kind of watching all these YouTube videos of testimonials and just getting really inspired. But after 7 days of doing the meditations, I felt like all the fear and anxiety that I had just totally evaporated. And I felt so like everything's going to be fine. And it was just such a mental shift for me. And so I was really inspired also because of that to keep doing the meditations, because I thought, well, at least this is really good for my mental health. And about 6 weeks into doing the meditations, I heard about the 7-day, retreats. And I was like, oh man, I would love to be able to do that. But I don't have any money, because all my money hadn't been working, and it had all gone to like cancer treatments. And so I saw that there was a scholarship from Give to Give Foundation. So I applied for that. And at the time that I applied, I had no idea how I would even be able to get there. I was in San Diego, and I applied for the one in Portland, Oregon, because that was the closest one. But it was a 3-hour flight. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to be able to even sit on a 3-hour flight, but I just, took a leap of faith and put the application out there. And then I just continued my meditations, and I started to notice little things, like I was able to walk a little bit longer distances, and I was able to sit like long enough to like have, lunch with my parents, at the dining room table instead of eating lying down. And I was like able to stand long enough to take a shower. And so I just started to notice these like physical changes as well. So the 3 months finally passed, and it was time for me to get my MRI to prepare for the surgery. And it was really weird, because every MRI that I had, there was always so much anxiety and fear. And a lot of people who have dealt with cancer know it as scan anxiety because it's just so much anxiety. But for some reason, I went into this to get this MRI like as if I was going to the dentist or like getting a haircut. Like there was just like no anxiety whatsoever. And the next day they emailed me my MRI results, and my oncologist called and she said, your tumor has shrunk by about 30%. And so of course, that was great news. And I told the surgeon, again, like, I'm going to hold off on surgery. I just want to, keep meditating. And he thought I was crazy and kind of reiterated that, it's not a very smart decision. But I just kept meditating. Oh, wait, let me go back. So that day that I got the MRI results, 2 hours later, I got an email from the Give to Give Foundation that I had gotten the scholarship to come to Portland, Oregon. And again, I just thought like, what a coincidence. But then I was reading about synchronicity and I was like, okay, this is a synchronicity, that these two amazing pieces of news happened on the same day, like within 2 hours of each other. So I kept meditating. That was in May of 2019 when I got the news, and the retreat was in July of 2019. So I had a few more months. I kept meditating every day. I went to the retreat in Portland, Oregon, had an amazing experience. I was a Healy one day. And for me, being a Healy was actually very subtle. I think I had some like high expectations that I was like going to levitate or something. I don't know. And it was just very subtle. And I remember feeling a little bit disappointed because I was like, I wanted to have this like amazing experience and feel like all the energy. But then the next day I was a healer. And for me, that was like the most powerful experience, that I felt like my heart opened. I felt so much energy. I was just like bawling. And I felt so much love that day. So for me, being a healer was actually much more profound. And I know everybody has a different experience, but I really appreciated what Dr. Joe said about like, you can also heal being a healer. And so after the 7-day retreat, I went home. And of course, I forgot to mention that by this time I was like able, everything kept improving. I was able to walk, stand, sit by the time I got to the retreat. So I was still in a little bit of pain, still on some morphine, but even my pain was like going down. So I went back home. I got my next MRI in September, and the tumor had shrunk even more significantly than the prior one. So now it had like shrunk by about 40%. So things were obviously turning around and looking good. And I just kept meditating every day. And in 2021, I came to another retreat here in Cancun, and that was in February. And then July of that year, I received from my oncologist, he classified me as no evidence of disease. Thank you. And I never had to have the surgery, and it's been 7 years. And at some point I decided, I think it was when the surgeon told me, like, I don't expect you to live in, more than 5 years. I just like started I just decided like, I'm going to be in the business of proving doctors wrong. So I actually like made this like little list that I keep in my phone, and it's like kind of all the things that doctors told me I would never be able to do again, but I'm doing those things, So of course, it's been 7 years. I'm still fine. Everything is great. I get an MRI every year. And the other thing was like, they told me that I would never get my cycle back, but I got my cycle back. They said I would go into early menopause. They said that I would walk with a limp for the rest of my life. So when I was able to walk again, I walked, with a limp because I had all this nerve damage from the radiation, and I'm able to walk fine now. And then they also told me that I would never be able to go to the bathroom normally. There was a time when the tumor was growing and it kind of was impinging on my bladder. So I had to use catheters, and they told me that I would have to do that for the rest of my life. And I don't have to do that anymore. I go to the bathroom normally. So my doctors were very surprised by that. And trying to remember what else, but I have a list. Hold on. I'll give me a list. Okay. Oh, they said I'd never be able to surf again, and I'm doing that. And they also told me that I would most likely be on pain medication, on opioids for the rest of my life, because most patients with this cancer are. And I'm totally 100% pain-free, not on any pain medication at all.
Why? 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 Because she's making her own endogenous opioids. That's what the data says. I'm not saying that. The data says that 100% of the people are making their own endogenous morphine. She doesn't need it any longer. Her body's making it by thought alone.
And the interesting thing about the pain was, like, for me, the pain, going through the level of pain that I went through was probably the worst part of the whole experience. And so being completely pain-free for me is like the best part of the experience. And I know that the meditations helped me to get off my medication, because I remember I would wake up with pain and then I'd go into a meditation and then the pain would be gone for the rest of the day. And I would just kind of repeat that cycle until I was no longer waking up with pain. So for me, that was like an amazing thing to just witness as well. And this is probably TMI, but they also told me I would never be able to have orgasms.
Is she the living example of truth? She is the example of truth. Now listen closely. It's beautiful to see someone say, I did it every day. Did you hear her say that? How many times did she say that? She said it over and over again. Every single small change that she had. I mean, she was laying pretty much face down. I know I went through that myself in San Diego. I was face down for 10 weeks, a little more than 10 weeks. All she needed was one change, one subtle change to correlate what I'm doing in here is producing this effect out here. And whatever I'm doing in here, I'm going to keep doing it to see if I can produce that effect. So it wasn't a have to. It wasn't like, oh, I have to meditate now. She was curious actually to see, okay, it makes total sense to me. I read all the books. I got all the information. I'm smart. I want to apply it. This makes sense. I'm going to get my body involved. I'm going to do this. I'm going to discipline myself. Every time that she notices another change, she just kind of moved from one personality to another personality over time. And every time her body responded to her mind, she believed in what she was doing a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And she had to come up against what's normal, what's natural, how it doesn't respond, what the alternatives are to not be in fear. It's entirely possible that living in fear could accelerate the growth of the tumor. The moment she switched from fear to neutral and then ultimately to love during that coherence healing, the body was living in a whole different life. And the greater the love, the stronger the signal to the gene. And you make 1,300 to 1,400 different chemicals in your body that begin to create growth and repair. She's more life. She's more wholeness. She's not the same person. She changed her genetic destiny by choosing herself every single day, and choosing herself over and over again. She wakes up in her dream. She literally wakes up in the reality where she's absolutely whole. 4 Minute Mile is looking you right in the eye. If it's happened to her, it could happen to you.